My sister announced to 200 guests that I was fixated on her husband. But the moment he responded, the truth hit her so hard she nearly collapsed right there in front of everyone. It was supposed to be a day of joy, a celebration of love. Instead, it became the day my sister publicly accused me of trying to steal her fiancé, tearing her own wedding apart in a calculated plot, all because of a story she'd invented in her own mind. Can you believe that? My own sister. Growing up, my sister Serafina and I were never close. She was always the golden child, the pretty one, the one who got the biggest bedroom. I was just Chloe, the younger sister, always in her shadow. But when I turned 22 and moved 3 states away for work, something unexpected happened. The distance, ironically, helped our relationship more than anything else ever had. We started texting regularly, having real conversations, and for the first time in my life, I truly thought we could be real sisters. Then she met Liam. Liam was a guy I'd gone on exactly 2 dates with back in college. 2 utterly awkward coffee dates where we both quickly realized there was zero chemistry, and we mutually ghosted each other. So, when Serafina told me she was dating someone named Liam and showed me his picture, I actually laughed. I told her about our failed attempt at romance years ago. She got quiet on the phone and my stomach dropped a little. I quickly assured her it meant nothing, that I barely even remembered the guy, and she seemed to accept it. 8 months later they got engaged. And Serafina asked me to be her maid of honor. I was genuinely touched. I took time off work, flew home for every event, spent way too much money on her bachelorette party. And I did it all happily, genuinely believing we had finally become the sisters I'd always longed for. But then, a month before the wedding, Serafina called me in tears. She said one of her bridesmaids had dropped out due to a family emergency, and now the numbers were uneven. She asked if my best friend Lena could fill in last minute. Lena, being the amazing person she is, agreed immediately. Serafina seemed so grateful. She told me she was doing a champagne and gold color scheme and even sent Lena a link to the exact dress she wanted her to wear. Lena ordered it right away. The week of the wedding, I flew home and stayed at my parents' house. Serafina was incredibly stressed and snippy, but I just chalked it up to wedding nerves. I mean, it's a big day, right? The morning of the ceremony arrived, and all the bridesmaids met at the venue to get ready together. I walked in with Lena, and that's when I immediately noticed something was terribly, terribly wrong. Every single bridesmaid was wearing a deep burgundy dress. Every single one except Lena, who was standing there in champagne gold, looking completely out of place, like she'd walked into the wrong wedding. My stomach dropped, my heart racing. Just then, Serafina emerged from the bridal suite in her robe, with this look on her face I can only describe as utterly satisfied. She gasped loudly, a performance for the whole room, and then turned to her new maid of honor, her college roommate who had replaced me in the role 2 weeks prior, without explanation. I knew Chloe would try something, Serafina spat, her voice dripping with venom. She's been jealous of me and Liam since the beginning. I just stared at her, frozen. What are you talking about? I managed to choke out. She didn't even look at me. She told the entire room that I had been obsessed with Liam for years, that I had tried to break them up multiple times, and that she suspected I had deliberately put Lena in the wrong dress to cause drama on her big day. I stood there, mouth agape, as Lena, bless her heart, calmly pulled out her phone. She showed everyone the text thread with Serafina, the link to the champagne dress, Serafina's message saying, "This is perfect. Order it ASAP." The room went dead silent. Serafina's face twisted. She started screaming that I must have faked the text somehow, that I was always jealous of her, that I wanted her life. Her college roommate tried to calm her down, but Serafina shoved her away. Then she pointed at me, accusing me in front of everyone of having probably slept with Liam, and that this whole thing was part of my plan. That's when Liam walked in. He had heard the screaming from the hallway where the groomsmen were getting ready. He looked at Serafina, then at me, then back at her. He asked her, his voice tight, what was going on. Serafina immediately ran to him, collapsing into his arms, crying, telling him that I was trying to ruin everything, that I had always been in love with him. Liam looked at her, then at me, then back at her. He took a deep, weary breath. He said he had told her 100 times that nothing ever happened between us, that we went on 2 bad dates 5 years ago, and that he was getting really tired of her constantly bringing it up. He revealed that she had made him block me on social media, had gone through his phone weekly looking for messages from me, and had even accused him of thinking about me during intimate moments. The room was dead silent. Serafina started crying harder, saying she just loved him so much and was scared of losing him. Liam took a step back from her, slowly, deliberately. He told her he couldn't do this anymore, that he had ignored the red flags for too long because he thought she would calm down after the wedding. His voice was filled with sorrow but also a quiet resolve. He said he was sorry, but he couldn't marry someone who trusted him this little. And then he walked out. Just like that. Serafina collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably while her bridesmaids stood around looking utterly helpless. I grabbed Lena's hand. We left. We drove to a diner and ordered pancakes, and I sat there in my burgundy bridesmaid dress, eating breakfast at 10 a.m. on what was supposed to be my sister's wedding day. My phone blew up for hours with calls from my parents, from Serafina, from relatives demanding to know what happened. I turned it off and ordered more coffee. 3 months later, I heard through my mom that Serafina had started therapy. Then last week she reached out to me. She asked to meet for lunch. She said she had something important to tell me about Liam. Something I deserved to know from the beginning. I still haven't decided if I'm going yet. I stare at Serafina's text message for the 10th time, reading the words until they start to blur together on my phone screen. I have something important to tell you about Liam. Something you deserve to know from the beginning. My stomach twists into knots because I can't imagine what she could possibly reveal now that would actually matter. Liam walked out of that wedding 3 months ago, and honestly I thought that was the end of it. I set my phone down on my kitchen counter and pick it up again 30 seconds later, just to reread the message. The words don't change. I grab my phone again and pull up Lena's number, pressing call before I can talk myself out of it. She answers on the second ring, and I don't even say hello before launching into it, telling her about Serafina's message and how my hands won't stop shaking. Lena's response is immediate and firm. She tells me I absolutely should not meet Serafina alone, that this could be another setup, another manipulation. We talk for 20 minutes, going in circles about whether I should even respond. Finally, we agree that if I decide to do this, she's coming with me as backup. I thank her and hang up, then spend the rest of the evening staring at my phone and trying to figure out what Serafina could possibly need to tell me. I sleep terribly that night, waking up every few hours to check if Serafina has sent another message. She hasn't. The next day at work drags on forever. I can barely focus on the spreadsheets in front of me because my brain keeps spinning through possibilities. That evening, I text Lena again and we talk through it one more time. She reminds me that I don't owe Serafina anything, that I can just ignore the message and move on with my life. But something about the way Serafina worded it, the deserve to know from the beginning part, makes me think maybe this is actually important. After 2 days of thinking it over and driving myself crazy with speculation, I finally text Serafina back. I tell her I'll meet her for lunch at a neutral location, a cafe called Riverside that's halfway between my parents' house and my apartment. I add that I'm bringing Lena and she can take it or leave it. I hit send before I can second-guess myself and then immediately want to throw my phone across the room. My phone buzzes less than 5 minutes later with Serafina's response. She agrees to my terms without any argument or pushback. I stare at her message in complete shock because the old Serafina, the one from before the wedding disaster, would have absolutely demanded it be just the two of us so she could control the conversation and the narrative. This quick agreement to let Lena come makes me nervous in a completely different way. Like maybe Serafina has actually changed, or maybe this is some new kind of manipulation I haven't figured out yet. I forward the text thread to Lena, and she responds with 3 question marks. Clearly just as surprised as I am. We agree to meet at my apartment an hour before lunch so we can drive over together. The morning of the lunch arrives and I wake up feeling like I might throw up. I try to eat breakfast but can only manage half a piece of toast before my stomach rebels. Lena shows up at my door right on time, takes one look at my face and pulls me into a hug. She tells me we can still cancel, that we can get in her car right now and drive to the beach instead and forget this whole thing. But I shake my head and grab my jacket because I need to know what Serafina wants to tell me, even if it's going to mess me up all over again. Lena drives because my hands are shaking too much to be safe behind the wheel. She keeps up a steady stream of conversation during the 20-minute drive, talking about her job and her annoying coworker and anything except the lunch we're heading toward. Every few minutes she reminds me that we can leave any time I want, that I'm in control of this situation. We arrive at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early and grab a table in the back corner where I can see the door. I order a coffee I don't drink and Lena gets a tea she doesn't touch either. We sit there in tense silence watching every person who walks through the door. When Serafina finally walks in right at noon, I barely recognize her at first. She's lost at least 15 pounds since the wedding, maybe more, and she looks completely exhausted. Her face is thinner, her clothes hang loose on her frame, and there are dark circles under her eyes that makeup can't quite hide. She spots us immediately and walks over slowly, like she's not sure if we're going to get up and leave. She sits down in the empty chair across from me without ordering anything. Her hands are shaking as she folds them on the table in front of her. She opens her mouth twice before any words come out, and when they do, her voice is shaking almost as badly as her hands. She apologizes for everything that happened at the wedding, for the accusations and the dress setup and the complete nightmare she put me through. She tells me her therapist, Dr. Evelyn, has been helping her understand that she had an obsessive jealousy problem that completely destroyed her relationship with Liam and damaged her relationship with me. I sit there without saying anything, just listening and trying to process the fact that my sister is actually taking responsibility for her actions. Serafina keeps talking, explaining that Liam had told her about our 2 college dates on their second date together, and she'd been paranoid about it ever since. She admits that she made him block me on social media, that she checked his phone constantly looking for messages from me, that she accused him of thinking about me during their most private moments. Her voice cracks when she talks about how she drove him away with her constant suspicion and accusations. She tells me that the dress setup wasn't a last-minute panic or wedding day stress. It was a planned sabotage that she'd been working on for weeks. She wanted to prove to everyone, especially to Liam, that I was trying to ruin her wedding. She thought if she could make me look bad in front of all those people, Liam would finally see that I was the real problem in their relationship and not her jealousy. She actually believed that humiliating me would somehow fix everything between them. Serafina starts crying now, real tears streaming down her face, and I feel Lena squeeze my hand under the table hard enough that it almost hurts. I take a deep breath and ask Serafina the question that's been burning in my mind since I got her text. I ask her why she's telling me all this now and what the important information about Liam actually is, because so far she hasn't told me anything I didn't already know or couldn't have guessed. Serafina takes a deep breath and wipes her eyes with a napkin that's already falling apart in her hands. She tells me that Liam had actually tried multiple times to invite me to hang out with them as a couple. He wanted to prove there was nothing between us. Wanted to show her that we could all be normal together. But every single time he suggested it, she refused and accused him of wanting to cheat. She says she would scream at him for hours after he brought it up, telling him he was trying to humiliate her by forcing her to watch him flirt with me. Liam would try to explain that wasn't his intention at all, that he just wanted her to see how platonic our history was, but she couldn't hear it. She was so deep in her jealousy that any mention of my name sent her into a panic. She shifts in her seat and starts talking faster, like she needs to get it all out before she loses her nerve. She reveals that Liam had suggested couples therapy 6 months before the wedding. He was worried about her jealousy and thought a professional could help them work through it together. But Serafina refused and told him he was the one with the problem for not understanding her feelings. She says she actually convinced herself that his suggestion of therapy meant he was planning to leave her for me. In her mind, therapy was just his way of preparing her for the breakup so he wouldn't feel guilty when he ran off with me. She admits now that this made no sense, but at the time it felt completely real and logical to her. Liam tried to explain that therapy would help them both, that it wasn't about blame, but she shut down every conversation about it. The waitress comes by to refill our water glasses and Serafina stops talking until she walks away. Then she looks directly at me, her eyes red-rimmed, and says, "The important information I wanted to tell you is that Liam never had any romantic feelings for you whatsoever. Not even a tiny bit." She says her therapist helped her realize she invented an entire story in her head that had no basis in reality. Liam never looked at me in any special way, never mentioned me except when she brought me up, never gave her any actual reason to think he wanted me. She created this whole fantasy where I was secretly in love with him and he was secretly in love with me and she was the only one who could see the truth. I sit there completely stunned, not by the revelation itself, but by the fact that this was the important secret. I thought she was going to reveal some actual secret, something I didn't know. But this is just her confirming what I already knew, what everyone at that wedding already knew. I tell her I could have told her that myself, since I was there for those 2 awkward coffee dates where we talked about economics homework and realized we had nothing in common. I remind her that I barely remembered him when she first showed me his picture, that I had to think for a minute to even place who he was. Serafina nods and says she knows that now, but she spent years building up this fantasy where I was secretly in love with Liam and trying to steal him from her. She says she even convinced herself that I moved 3 states away specifically to make Liam miss me. In her mind, my job opportunity and my desire for independence didn't matter. Everything I did was part of some elaborate plan to make Liam realize he wanted me instead of her. She would lie awake at night imagining scenarios where Liam would suddenly remember our coffee dates and realize I was his soulmate. She says her therapist has helped her understand that she was projecting her own insecurities onto me and Liam, creating a villain in her story so she didn't have to face her real fears about not being good enough. Lena finally speaks up, her voice sharp in a way I rarely hear from her. "Why did you replace Chloe as maid of honor 2 weeks before the wedding?" The question hangs in the air and I realize I'd almost forgotten about that detail and everything else that happened. Serafina looks down at the table and her face goes red with shame. She admits she was afraid Lena would defend me when she executed her dress sabotage plan. Lena had been her college roommate and knew both of us pretty well. And Serafina was worried Lena would speak up and ruin the whole setup. So she made up some story about needing someone who understood her vision better and demoted Lena to regular bridesmaid status. She says Lena was hurt and confused but accepted it because she didn't want to cause drama before the wedding. I feel anger rising in my chest like hot water filling up a container. This wasn't a moment of wedding day panic or stress-induced paranoia. Serafina had been planning to humiliate me for weeks, maybe months. She had carefully orchestrated the dress colors, the timing, the setup with Lena, all of it. She had replaced her maid of honor specifically to make sure no one would defend me when she made her accusations in front of everyone. Every detail was calculated and cruel, designed to make me look like the villain in her made-up story. I think about all the phone calls leading up to the wedding where she sounded so grateful for my help, so happy that we were getting closer as sisters. All of that was fake while she was planning this elaborate trap. Serafina reaches across the table trying to take my hand, but I pull it away before she can touch me. She starts crying harder, the tears running down her face faster than she can wipe them away. She says she understands if I never forgive her, that she wouldn't forgive herself if she were in my position, but she needed me to know the truth about how sick her thinking had become. She says her therapist, Dr. Evelyn, has been helping her understand that she needs to take full responsibility for her actions, not just apologize and expect everything to be okay. She knows she destroyed our relationship and destroyed her relationship with Liam, and it was all because of problems that existed only in her head. I ask her if she's been in contact with Liam at all since the wedding. My voice sounds cold even to my own ears. Serafina shakes her head and more tears fall onto the table between us. She says Liam blocked her number the same day he walked out, and she found out through a mutual friend that he moved to a different city about a month later. She doesn't blame him for wanting nothing to do with her. She says she put him through hell for their entire relationship, accusing him of things he never did, controlling who he could talk to, checking his phone like a detective, looking for evidence of a crime that never happened. She admits that walking out of that wedding was probably the best decision he ever made, even though it destroyed her at the time. Lena asks the question I'm too angry to voice myself. She wants to know if Serafina has apologized to Liam for what she put him through. Serafina wipes her face with her sleeve and nods slowly. She says she wrote him a letter through her therapist about a month ago. Dr. Evelyn helped her write something that took responsibility without making excuses or asking for anything in return. She sent it to his new address, but she has no idea if he ever read it. She says she hopes he did because he deserves to know that none of it was his fault, that he did nothing wrong, but she's not expecting or wanting a response. She just needed him to know that she understands now how badly she treated him. I push my chair back from the table and stand up, my legs feeling shaky after sitting through Serafina's confession. I tell her I need time to process everything she's told me, and I'm not ready to say I forgive her, or that we can rebuild our relationship. The words come out flat and tired because I've been holding them in for the past hour while she cried and explained her therapy breakthroughs. Serafina nods and wipes her face with a napkin that's already soaked through. She says she expected that, but she hopes someday I might be willing to try. Her voice cracks on the last word, and part of me wants to comfort her, but a bigger part remembers standing in that bridal suite while she accused me of sleeping with Liam in front of everyone. Lena stands up next to me and puts her hand on my shoulder, a silent reminder that we're leaving now. As we're getting up to leave, Serafina mentions that she's also apologized to Lena for setting her up with the wrong dress. She looks at Lena with red, swollen eyes and says she knows it doesn't fix anything, but she wanted Lena to know she was sorry. Lena accepts the apology, but tells Serafina it's going to take more than sorry to fix what she did to both of us. Her tone is polite but cold, and I'm grateful she's here because I don't think I could handle this conversation alone. We walk out of the cafe into bright afternoon sunlight that feels wrong for how heavy everything feels. On the drive home, Lena and I sit in silence for 20 minutes before I finally break down crying. The tears come suddenly and I can't stop them. Big, ugly sobs that make my whole body shake. Lena pulls over into a gas station parking lot and just sits with me while I cry into my hands. I'm not even sure if I'm crying from anger, relief, or grief for the sister relationship I thought we were building. Maybe it's all three mixed together into something I don't have words for. Lena doesn't try to make me stop or tell me it's going to be okay. She just hands me tissues from the glove box and waits until I can breathe normally again. When I finally calm down enough to talk, I tell her I don't know what to do with all of this information. Knowing that Serafina planned everything, that she deliberately set up that dress situation to humiliate me, makes it worse somehow. Lena says we don't have to figure it out right now. We can just go home and watch bad TV and eat ice cream. That sounds perfect. So I nod and she pulls back onto the road. That evening my mom calls, asking how the lunch went because Serafina had told her we met. I give her a brief summary while sitting on my couch with a pint of chocolate ice cream. Mom listens without interrupting, and when I finish she lets out a long sigh. She admits she and Dad have been worried about Serafina's mental health for years, but didn't know how to address it. This surprises me because my parents never talked about Serafina having problems when we were growing up. Mom says they noticed things but hoped she would outgrow them, which clearly didn't happen. I ask her what kind of things they noticed, and there's a long pause before she answers. Mom reveals that Serafina had similar jealousy issues with her high school boyfriend, accusing his female friends of trying to steal him. She would call him constantly to check where he was and who he was with. They thought she'd grown out of it, but clearly the problems went deeper than they realized. I sit there holding my phone and wondering how I never knew any of this. Mom says they didn't want to label Serafina or make her feel bad about herself, so they just encouraged the boyfriend to be patient with her. He eventually broke up with her anyway because the jealousy was too much. I tell Mom I wish someone had warned Liam about this pattern before he got engaged to her. Mom's voice gets quiet and she says they thought about it but didn't want to interfere in Serafina's relationship. She sounds guilty now, like she's realizing they should have said something. We talk for another 15 minutes before I tell her I need to go. After we hang up, I sit in the dark thinking about how many people saw warning signs and said nothing. 2 weeks after the lunch, I get a text from Ben, Liam's best friend from the wedding. I recognize his name from the guest list and remember seeing him standing with the groomsmen that morning. He asks if we can talk because Liam wanted to reach out to me, but wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. My first thought is that this is weird, but then I remember Liam was a victim in all of this too. I text back saying, "Sure, we can talk." Ben suggests meeting for coffee the next day at a place near my apartment. I agree to meet Ben for coffee, curious about what Liam wants to say. The next afternoon, I walk into a small coffee shop and find Ben already sitting at a corner table. He's tall with dark hair and looks tired, like he hasn't been sleeping well. We shake hands and I sit down across from him. Ben explains that Liam felt terrible that I got caught up in Serafina's accusations and wanted to apologize for not defending me more strongly that day. He says Liam has been beating himself up about it for months, replaying that morning over and over. I tell Ben that Liam doesn't owe me an apology because he was dealing with his own crisis in that moment. Ben nods, but says Liam still wants me to know he wishes he had handled things differently. He pulls out his phone and shows me a text from Liam that basically says the same thing. Ben tells me that Liam had actually been planning to call off the wedding the week before, but his parents convinced him to try one more time. They told him every couple has problems and marriage would make things better. Liam knew that was wrong, but he loved Serafina and wanted to believe she would change. Ben says Liam regrets not trusting his instincts and walking away sooner. He thinks if he had ended things privately before the wedding, I wouldn't have been dragged into the mess. I appreciate that Liam is thinking about me, but I tell Ben that Serafina would have found another way to blame me for the breakup. Her problems weren't really about me or Liam. They were about whatever was going on in her own head. I asked Ben if Liam knew about the dress setup plan and Ben says, absolutely not. Liam was genuinely shocked when he walked into that room and heard what Serafina was saying about me. Ben says Liam had no idea Serafina had sent Lena the wrong dress color on purpose. He thought it was an honest mistake until he saw how satisfied Serafina looked when she started making accusations. That's when everything clicked for him and he realized how far gone she really was. Ben leans back in his chair and says, Liam spent the whole morning getting ready thinking about how to bring up his concerns about the relationship one more time. He never imagined he'd walk in on a planned attack. I believe Ben because Liam's face that morning showed real confusion and horror. Ben gives me Liam's new number and says Liam would like to apologize directly if I'm open to it. He writes it down on a napkin and slides it across the table. I take the number but tell Ben part of me wants to talk to Liam and clear the air, but another part thinks it might be better to just let everything stay in the past. Ben says he understands and tells me to take my time. We finish our coffee and talk about other things for a while, just normal conversation about work and life. It's nice to have a casual chat that isn't about wedding drama or family problems. When we leave the coffee shop, Ben gives me a quick hug and says he hopes I'm doing okay. I tell him I'm working on it, which feels like the most honest answer I can give. I spend the next month throwing myself into work, taking on extra projects that keep my brain too busy to spiral. Lena checks in on me every few days and one Friday she shows up at my apartment with 2 packed bags and announces we're going to the beach for the weekend. I don't argue because I know she's right that I need to get away from everything. We drive 3 hours to a small beach town and rent a cheap motel room that smells like salt water and old carpet. We spend Saturday walking along the shore, and Lena lets me talk through everything that happened without interrupting or trying to fix it. I tell her how weird it feels that my sister's mental health crisis became the defining moment of my year. How I'm angry at Serafina but also sad for her. How I don't know if I'll ever trust her again even if she gets better. Lena listens and nods and occasionally throws shells into the waves. Sunday morning we sit on the beach eating donuts and watching the sunrise, and I realize this is the first time in weeks that my chest doesn't feel tight. When we drive home that afternoon I feel like maybe I can actually move forward instead of just surviving. The next week I'm sitting at my desk staring at Liam's number that Ben gave me. I've picked up my phone a dozen times and put it back down because I don't know what I'd even say to him. But then I think about how he walked out of that wedding and probably spent months dealing with his own mess. And maybe we both deserve to clear the air. I send him a text that just says, "It's me," and asks if he wants to talk sometime. He responds within an hour saying yes and gives me his new number since he changed it after everything happened. We set up a time for Thursday evening and I spend the next 3 days being nervous about a phone call with someone I barely know. When Thursday comes, I almost cancel 5 times, but at 7 o'clock I dial his number and he picks up on the second ring. The first few minutes are so awkward that I consider faking bad reception and hanging up. But then Liam says he's been wanting to apologize to me for months. And suddenly the conversation gets easier. He tells me he feels terrible that I got dragged into Serafina's accusations, that he should have defended me more strongly in that moment instead of just defending himself. I can hear genuine guilt in his voice, and it makes me feel less alone in this whole situation. Liam starts explaining how he ignored so many red flags because Serafina was perfect in every other way. He says she was loving and supportive and funny. And he convinced himself that her jealousy was just insecurity that would fade once they got married and she felt more secure in the relationship. He thought if he just proved his loyalty enough times, blocked me on social media like she asked, let her check his phone whenever she wanted, that eventually she'd trust him. He admits now that he was wrong to think marriage would fix her problems, and he wishes he'd recognized the patterns earlier. I listened to him talk about checking in with her constantly when he was out with friends, about avoiding female coworkers because it upset her, about the time she accused him of thinking about me during sex and he actually tried to convince her that wasn't true instead of recognizing how messed up the accusation was. He sounds exhausted just recounting it all, and I start to understand that he was drowning in that relationship long before the wedding day. I tell Liam he doesn't owe me an apology because he was dealing with his own crisis that morning, and I don't blame him for how he reacted. I explain that I was just collateral damage in Serafina's issues, but he was the actual target of all that jealousy and control. We end up talking for over an hour and I realize he's actually a really decent person who got caught in a bad situation with someone he loved. He tells me about the guilt he felt leaving Serafina sobbing on the floor, how his parents were furious with him for embarrassing the family, how half their mutual friends took her side because they couldn't believe sweet Serafina would do something so calculated. He moved to a new city 2 months after the wedding disaster because he couldn't handle running into people who knew them as a couple. I find myself feeling protective of him even though we're basically strangers because I know what it's like to be blamed for Serafina's problems. Liam mentions he started therapy right after the wedding, working through his own trust issues and learning to spot unhealthy relationship patterns before they get that bad. His therapist helped him understand that he'd been in a controlling relationship and didn't even realize it because Serafina's control came wrapped in love and concern. He says walking out of that wedding was the hardest thing he's ever done, but also the best decision because staying would have destroyed him eventually. I hear real conviction in his voice when he talks about it, like he's finally accepted that leaving was the right choice, even though it felt awful. He asks how I'm doing with everything and I'm honest that I'm still processing it all, still deciding if I want to rebuild a relationship with Serafina or just let it go. Liam doesn't give me advice but he listens. Really listens. And that feels more valuable than any advice could be. We end the call agreeing to stay in touch as friends, which feels strange considering he's my sister's ex, and we went on 2 terrible dates years ago, but it also feels healthy and honest. There's something freeing about talking to someone who understands exactly what Serafina's jealousy looks like from the inside. After we hang up, I sit on my couch for a while thinking about how weird life is. How the wedding disaster connected me to someone I never would have known otherwise. I save his new number in my phone under just Liam. No last name, no context, just a person who gets it. 3 months pass and I'm getting coffee before work when my phone buzzes with a text from Serafina. She's asking if I'd be willing to meet again, saying she's made real progress in therapy and wants to share some things she's learned about herself. I stare at the message while my coffee gets cold, trying to figure out how I feel about seeing her again. Part of me wants to ignore it and keep living my life without her drama, but another part is curious about what she wants to say. I text Lena asking what she thinks, and Lena says I should do whatever feels right for me, that she'll support either decision. I spend 2 days thinking about it before I finally respond to Serafina saying yes, I'll meet her. But this time I want to do it alone without Lena there. I need to know if Serafina and I can have a real conversation without a buffer. We agree to meet at the same cafe where we had lunch before. And when I walk in, Serafina is already there at a corner table. She looks different, healthier somehow, like she's been sleeping through the night and eating regular meals. Her hair is pulled back and she's wearing minimal makeup. Nothing like the perfectly put-together version of her I grew up with. I sit down across from her and order tea and we make awkward small talk for a few minutes about the weather and work. Then Serafina takes a deep breath and tells me she's been diagnosed with something called obsessive-compulsive disorder with relationship-focused obsessions. She explains that her therapist, Dr. Evelyn, helped her understand that the intrusive thoughts about me and Liam weren't rational jealousy. They were a symptom of OCD that made her brain get stuck on fears of abandonment and betrayal. She's on medication now and learning coping strategies in therapy, and she says it's like someone turned down the volume on the constant anxious noise in her head. Serafina starts explaining that her jealousy was never really about me or Liam specifically. It was about this deep terror of being abandoned that came from our childhood. She talks about how we were always compared to each other. How she felt like she had to be perfect to be loved because any flaw meant I would be chosen over her. She says she internalized this idea that love was conditional and could be stolen away if someone better came along. So she tried to control everything to prevent that from happening. I sit there listening and realizing that while I spent our childhood feeling invisible next to her, she spent it feeling like she was one mistake away from losing everything. We both grew up in the same house but experienced completely different versions of our family, and neither of us knew what the other was going through. I take a breath and tell Serafina that I need to share something too. That growing up, I always felt like I was in her shadow. She looks confused, so I explain how I was just the younger sister who wasn't as pretty or accomplished. How I felt invisible next to her. Serafina's face changes and she says she had no idea I felt that way, that she always thought I had it easier because there was less pressure on me. We sit there for a long time talking about our childhood in a way we never have before. Both of us realizing we spent years misunderstanding each other's experience. She tells me about feeling like she had to be perfect or she'd lose our parents' love. And I tell her about feeling like nothing I did mattered because she'd already done it better. It's the first truly honest conversation we've ever had about being sisters. When we're getting ready to leave the cafe, Serafina asks if there's anything she can do to make up for everything beyond just saying sorry. I think about it for a minute and tell her the most important thing is that she keeps going to therapy and working on her mental health, not just for me but for herself. She nods and says, Dr. Evelyn has been helping her understand that her problems go deeper than just the wedding situation. We walk out to the parking lot together and stand by our cars for a few minutes, just talking about normal things like work and the weather. Before we drive away, Serafina suggests that maybe we could try rebuilding our relationship slowly, like meeting for coffee once a month, where we can practice talking to each other honestly. I agree and tell her there's no pressure to become best friends overnight. We're just committing to try. She looks relieved and gives me a quick hug before getting in her car. I drive home feeling lighter than I have in months. Like maybe there's a chance for us after all. A few days later, I'm at my parents' house for Sunday dinner when my Uncle Arthur pulls me aside in the kitchen. He tells me he's proud of me for being willing to give Serafina another chance while still keeping healthy boundaries. Uncle Arthur has always been the wise one in our family, the person everyone goes to for advice about relationships and life problems. He says, what you're doing is what real forgiveness looks like, that it's not about pretending nothing happened, but about choosing to move forward anyway. I tell him I'm scared Serafina might fall back into old patterns. And he reminds me that's why the boundaries matter, that I can support her growth without letting her hurt me again. We rejoin everyone in the dining room and I notice my parents watching Serafina and me interact with this hopeful look on their faces. Like they're afraid to believe things might actually get better between us. 6 months pass and I get invited to a small family dinner at my parents' house. When I arrive, Serafina is already there helping Mom set the table. We say hi to each other and fall into easy conversation about a TV show we both watch. It's not perfect and there are still some awkward moments, but it feels genuine in a way our relationship never did before. We all sit down to eat and Dad asks Serafina about her new job, and she talks about it without the fake enthusiasm she used to have when trying to prove everything was perfect. Later, when we're clearing dishes, Mom pulls me into the hallway and says she's so relieved to see Serafina and me talking and laughing together. I can tell she was worried we'd never speak again after the wedding disaster. Throughout the evening, I catch myself actually enjoying Serafina's company, not forcing it or pretending, but genuinely finding her funny and interesting. When I'm leaving, Serafina walks me to my car and tells me she started volunteering with a mental health advocacy group. She explains that she's been sharing her story at their meetings to help other people recognize obsessive relationship patterns before they destroy their lives. I'm surprised and impressed that she's turned her worst moment into something meaningful, that she's using what happened to help others. She says Dr. Evelyn encouraged her to find a way to give back and this felt right. I tell her I think that's really brave and she smiles in a way that looks different from her old smile, more real somehow. A week later, I'm at work when my phone buzzes with a text from Liam. I haven't heard from him in months, so I'm curious what he wants. The message says he started dating someone new and it's going really well, that he wanted to thank me for being a supportive friend during his healing process. I text back saying I'm genuinely happy for him and asking how he's been. He calls me during my lunch break and we talk for 20 minutes about his life and his new girlfriend. He sounds lighter, like he's finally moved past everything that happened with Serafina. I tell him about Serafina's progress in therapy and the volunteer work she's doing. And he says he's glad she's getting help, but he's not ready to have any contact with her yet. I understand completely and tell him he doesn't owe her anything. Before we hang up, he says he hopes Serafina and I can build something healthy together, that sisters are important. After the call, I sit in my car thinking about how strange it is that Liam and I are friends now when we barely knew each other before all this happened. The wedding disaster connected us in this weird way. Both of US victims of Serafina's obsession. That evening, I'm making dinner in my apartment when I start thinking about everything that's happened over the past year. The wedding disaster was one of the most painful experiences of my life, watching my sister accuse me in front of all those people and then seeing her relationship fall apart. But it also taught me important lessons about boundaries and forgiveness and the difference between enabling someone and supporting their growth. I learned that you can't fix someone else's mental health problems by ignoring them or making excuses for their behavior. I learned that real love means being honest, even when it's hard, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. Serafina and I will never have a perfect sister relationship like the ones you see in movies. But we're building something real and honest. We're learning to talk to each other without the layers of resentment and competition that defined our childhood. Slow and sometimes awkward, but it feels worth it. A year after the wedding that never happened, Serafina texts asking if I want to take a weekend trip together. Just the two of us, no parents or other family members. A chance to spend real time together. I'm nervous about it, but I agree. Figuring if things get weird, I can always drive home early. We book a spa weekend at a resort 2 hours away and drive up on a Friday afternoon. The first few hours are a little stiff as we settle into the hotel room and figure out how to be around each other for an extended period. But by dinner that night, we're talking easily, sharing stories about work and friends and the random things happening in our lives. On Saturday, we get massages and sit in the hot tub, and Serafina opens up about her therapy sessions in a way she hasn't before. She talks about the work she's doing to understand her fear of abandonment and how it shaped her behavior in relationships. I share my own struggles with feeling invisible and how moving away helped me build my own identity, separate from being Serafina's little sister. We spend hours by the pool talking about our hopes for the future and our commitment to breaking the unhealthy family patterns we grew up with. Serafina admits she's scared about dating again because she doesn't trust herself to recognize when she's falling into obsessive patterns. I tell her that's what therapy is for, to help her develop those skills. On Sunday morning, before we check out, we sit on the balcony drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. Serafina thanks me for giving her another chance, and I tell her I'm glad I did, but I can see how hard she's working to change. As I drive home Sunday afternoon, my car full of spa products and my body relaxed from the weekend, I feel genuinely optimistic about our future as sisters. We've both grown so much over the past year, doing the hard work of understanding ourselves and each other. The wedding day was traumatic and I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, but it forced us both to confront truths we'd been avoiding our whole lives. Serafina had to face her mental health issues and get real help instead of pretending everything was fine. I had to learn how to set boundaries and stop making myself small to avoid conflict. Sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the most important growth, and I'm grateful we both had the courage to do the hard work of healing. Our relationship will always have scars from what happened, but those scars are part of our story now. They remind us how far we've come and how much we've learned. I turn up the music and roll down the windows, feeling the warm air rush through the car. What about you? Have you ever had a relationship, especially with a family member, that you thought was completely broken, only to find a path to healing you never expected? Or maybe you've had to walk away from someone who just couldn't face their own issues. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.